My name is Daniel, and I have been working as a forest ranger in a huge forest in America for the past 12 years. In my 12-year career, I have encountered all kinds of incidents. I have rescued campers who lost their way in the woods. I have seen the bodies of people killed in bear attacks. I have even pulled bodies from frozen streams. Seeing a dead body, I thought nothing could be more terrifying. But then my duty took me to this forest called Kobina National Forest, and the few days I spent there changed my whole life. I realized what kind of things are hidden behind the beauty of these forests. This incident was last year, February 2024, when I was transferred to this forest. What actually happened was that the second forest ranger in the area had suddenly quit his job. After which the local supervisor there called me to her office. When I went to her office, I knew from the expression on her face that something was wrong, but no one was talking openly. He handed me a file and said, "Daniel, you are an old ranger in this area. There have been reports of very strange things happening in Sector 4 for some time now. So from now on, for the next few days, your duty will be in Sector 4. You will have to read this file carefully, investigate these cases, and submit your report." I asked the supervisor, what happened to Henry? Why did he suddenly resign? Henry was the same ranger who was previously posted in the same sector, and one day suddenly left his job. Hearing what I said, the supervisor became a little worried and hesitantly said, He left for personal reasons. He was not feeling well. But I don't know why. I felt like she was hiding something from me. Maybe she could see from the look on my face that I was suspicious. She said to herself, "Look, Daniel, I'm not going to lie to you. There's been a lot of strange things happening in this sector lately. People are disappearing. In the last month alone, 3 people have disappeared from this sector. Not just any novices, but expert hunters and hikers." She was hiding something. Maybe she could tell by my face that I was suspicious. She spoke up herself. "Look, Daniel, I'm not going to lie to you. There's been some very strange things happening in this sector lately. People are disappearing. 3 people have disappeared from this sector in the last month alone. Not just any inexperienced people, but experienced hunters and hackers. But we found one of them." He pulled out a picture of the man from the file and said, holding it to me. I swear, when I saw that picture, for a moment, my mind was spinning. There were bones in the picture, scattered in different places. But that wasn't the strangest thing, because any wild animal could have done that. The strangest thing was, the way those bones were laid out there, no animal could have done that. The bones were laid out in a regular manner, as if someone had picked up each bone with their hands and placed it in an orderly manner. There were also some stones around, as if some kind of worship or ritual had been performed there. She said, "This looks like the work of a bear," she said while lowering her eyes. We both knew that this was not the work of a bear. I picked up the file and started flipping through the pages. I found some photos of the man whose bones had been found attached to the file. He was a retired U.S. Army soldier who had also fought in the Vietnam War and was a very experienced hunter. He was accompanied by a very experienced wildlife photographer named Jessica Chen. The 2 of them had come to the forest for a documentary and then disappeared. I asked, "So you want me to go alone in this area and investigate?" She said, "Yes, we are forced to. The Forest Administration has a very small budget, and we cannot employ more than 1 ranger for this work. But you will have a radio phone with you at all times, and in case of any emergency, backup will reach you within 2 hours. The administration feels that you are the best ranger for this job. The ranger restroom in this sector has been restocked with food and drinks for your stay. You will have no problems." I took that file and came to my room at the base. While coming, I was thinking that why they have specially called me here to do duty from another sector. There were other rangers here. They could also have been given this job, but maybe all those rangers were not as experienced as me. That is why this responsibility was given to me. I was wondering what was the reason that they specifically called me from another sector for duty here. There were other rangers here. They could have been given this job too, but maybe all those rangers were not as experienced as me. That is why this assignment was given to me. What else could be the reason? Now let me tell you about this forest. This entire forest is spread over 80,000 acres and is so big that it has been divided into different sectors, and separate rangers have been deployed for each sector. Most of the people who come to roam here are hunters and backpackers who stay here for many days in camp. Then after dinner, I opened that file and started studying it and saw that in this one sector alone, there have been many reports of people disappearing in the last 18 months. You mean disappearing? I mean people who went for a walk in the forest, but were never found again. No body, no trace, just disappeared. But that wasn't all. Inside the file was an envelope. It said top secret. When I opened it, there was a report that the previous ranger who worked here had prepared over the past 3 months. This ranger's name was Henry. He had investigated the cases of some people who had disappeared from the forest. I picked up the report and flipped through some of its pages. My mind was wandering. There were some cases where people had disappeared from inside their tents. Even when the search team reached their camp to find them, the food kept in the camp was not even cold yet, but there was no sign of the campers. As I turned the pages, my mind was blown. There were some cases where people disappeared from inside their tents. Even when the search team reached their camp to find them, the food kept in the camp was not even cold yet, but there was no sign of the campers. Henry wrote in the report that in some areas of the sector, electronic devices would stop working strangely or start working completely incorrectly. And all of these things happened mostly where there was a small stream near the ranger station. But the most frightening were the reports that strange sounds were heard in some areas of the forest at night. In his final report, which he submitted just 2 days before his resignation, he wrote that a very detailed investigation of the entire area was needed. Very strange things are happening here. The behavior of the wild animals here is also changing completely. I also found footprints on the ground that do not match any wild animal. I am not safe in this area. I had also applied for backup, but I was not provided with any backup. I cannot work here. Henry wrote all this in his report. I had no idea that the work I was about to do now would prove to be the most difficult work of my life. Today, when I think about it, I realize that a person should never be so confident. The next morning, I reached this sector after a 4-hour drive with my Jeep and luggage. The first few kilometers were fine, but then the entire way to the ranger cabin was uphill, downhill, and rough. Phone. The signals had already been lost several kilometers before entering the sector. But somehow I reached this station with the help of my GPS device, the Green Pine Lake Station. This was the name of the station where I was to stay for the next few days. I had no other emergency equipment except my GPS unit, emergency radio phone, pepper spray, flashlight, and a pistol. When I reached the station, I saw that it was like a big house made of thick wooden logs. The station was old but sturdy, and right behind the station was a small river flowing. The cabin had solar panels on the roof and all the necessities were kept inside. Fan, light, washroom, fridge, etc. Everything was there. The first day passed comfortably. All the time was spent reading Henry's notes. At night I ate and then lay down to rest. It was then that I noticed the first strange thing. There was a strange silence in the forest. The forest was not new to me. I had spent years in the forest, and there was always some sound in the forest. Birds, wind, leaves. But there was an unusual stillness in this forest. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. The other strange thing I noticed was the deer footprints around the stream. Now, this may seem like a common thing to you, but when you work in the forest for years, you get used to noticing every little thing. There were lots of deer footprints in the stream behind the cabin. It was as if the deer had come there to drink water. But the strange thing was, there were footprints of coming there, but none of going back. How was that possible? All the footprints were going in the same direction. There was not a single trace of going back. There were many deer footprints in the stream behind the cabin, as if the deer had come there to drink water. But the strange thing was that there were footprints of coming there, but not one of going back. How was this possible? All the footprints were in the same direction. Not a single footprint was in the other direction. Then on the third day, I decided that I would investigate the area where all those bones were found. Henry's report had the coordinates of the place. It was about 4 kilometers from my cabin. The route was not too difficult. I packed my things and set off to go to the location. According to the calculations, it should not have taken me more than 1.5 to 2 hours to reach there. But I could not find that location. I could not reach there. I had a GPS, a detailed map of the area, but even after walking for 4 hours, I could not reach that place. Every time I turned around, I would return to where I started from. How was this possible? I have walked through the most difficult paths in the forest. This has never happened to me before. Finally, I decided to keep marking the trees with my knife as I went along so that I could track the path. But after walking for 2 hours, I was back where I had started marking. But how was this possible? Because according to the GPS, I was going in a straight line. Then how come I was coming to the same place again and again? Finally, I thought of calling the base, but the radio phone was only getting static. After many attempts, I finally got a call to the base. I told him that there was a problem with my GPS device. He asked what kind of problem. I didn't know what to say. I said that the GPS was showing my location incorrectly. After a few seconds of silence, a voice came from the other end. "Daniel, do you have a medical emergency? Are you okay?" I said, "Yes, I'm fine. It's just that my GPS isn't working." She said, "No problem. You change the GPS battery and go back to your station." I went back to the station. The strange thing was that my GPS was working perfectly on the way back. So far, everything was fine, but I had no idea what I was going to encounter the next day. The next day, I was doing my routine patrolling along the riverbank when suddenly I saw some footprints on the wet ground. From a distance, they looked exactly like human footprints, 5 toe prints. But when I got closer and looked closely, each print was about 15 inches long. Human feet couldn't be that big. From above, the large nail-like prints were clearly visible on those toes. I followed these marks for about 500 meters. They were coming out of the river and heading straight into the forest. The strange thing was that they were going in a straight line. Every obstacle in the way, bushes, dead trees, seemed to make no difference to this thing. And then after going to one place, the sign suddenly disappeared. They just disappeared. There was no sign of going back. It was very strange. Whoever it was, where did it go from here? I immediately took some pictures of these signs on my phone. But in the evening when I came back to the cabin and started looking at the pictures, all those footprints were gone. The photos were on the phone, but they didn't have those footprints. That was the moment when I realized that whatever was happening here was completely beyond my understanding. The phone had a picture, but the footprints had disappeared. That was the moment I realized that what was happening here was completely beyond my understanding. Whatever was going on here was far beyond our technology. First, my GPS stopped working, then the pictures on my phone changed automatically. It was as if the forest itself didn't want you to know its secrets. Like Henry, I should have left this forest right then and there. But I was filled with pride. The pride that I would never give up. But that was my mistake. Very soon, my pride would be shattered. And then that was the first night when I first heard that sound. It was like a very soft whisper, and it wasn't coming from one side. It was coming from all sides. It was exactly like the sound of a phone vibrating. I got up and looked out the window, and after a few seconds of staring intently, I saw some shadows moving among the trees in the darkness outside. It wasn't my eyes deceiving me. There was definitely some movement there. I immediately picked up my pistol and flashlight and went outside to look in that direction. "Who's there?" I called out. But there was no one there. For 5 minutes, I stood there looking around. To tell you the truth, for the first time in this forest, I was truly afraid. Not of any animal or danger, but a strange fear, like I shouldn't be here. I was about to turn back to my cabin when suddenly I heard a faint sound. "Who's there?" It was my voice, exactly as I had just called out. My body went numb, my heart started beating fast. I looked back for a moment, but there was no one there. I quickly entered my cabin. I did not turn off the hall light of my cabin the whole night and kept the pistol on the side of the bed. My eyes were fixed on the window in front of the bed. And I can say with absolute certainty that in the darkness outside among the trees, I saw many shadows moving here and there. But every time I tried to look closely, those shadows suddenly disappeared into the darkness. I kept wondering if this was really happening or if it was just my eyes deceiving me. Somehow I was blind, but when I woke up in the morning, everything was normal. I also assumed that maybe I had been deceived. What is that? When we are scared, our mind also starts playing games with us. I thought that today I will investigate this area with full intensity and find out what was happening here. I was full of excitement, but all my excitement cooled when I found that circle. A round circle made on the ground. I had just gotten ready for patrolling in the morning when I saw that circle made on the ground in the middle of the forest. My steps stopped in an instant. It was a large circle, about 15 feet in diameter, made of small stones. This circle had not been here until the day before. That meant it had been made last night, and the most surprising thing was the bones placed inside the circle. I carefully approached the circle and saw that there were many bones inside. They looked like the bones of a deer, not a human, and each bone was placed thoughtfully. I mean, it wasn't like they were just thrown away, but the leg bones were placed in a cross shape, and the rest of the body bones were placed in separate shapes on top. And on top was the head of this deer, looking right at my ranger cab. I took pictures of everything and immediately radioed back to base. But what was this? My radio phone wasn't working at all. There was just static and nothing else. This couldn't be happening. I've never had a problem with my radio phone before. But things were about to get even weirder. I quickly started writing down the whole situation in my notebook so that I could report it to the base later. But as I did so, I felt like I was being watched over and over again. Every time I looked around, I couldn't see anything. After about an hour, I had written everything down in my notepad, but the radio phone was still not working. After an hour, I decided that I should leave now. The call to the base was not working, so I thought I would reach the cabin and take all my stuff and go back to the base. But as soon as I got a little further away from the area, the radio phone started working automatically, as if it had never been broken. As soon as I got back to the cabin, I called the base again and told my supervisor that I had found some very strange things here. She said, "Strange things? What did you find?" I said, "I found bones here in a place that were decorated in the right ritual way. Send backup as soon as possible. We need to check this whole area thoroughly." She said, "Okay, I'll report to the manager. Until then, you hang in there and keep doing your job. And yes, take care of yourself," she said while hanging up the call. The whole day passed normally after that, but the only thing going on in my mind was, what is all this happening? It was clear that this was not the work of a wild animal. Either way, it was a human hand behind it, making a perfect circle on the ground, placing bones and a severed deer head in the middle of it. Was this all a joke? Maybe some mischievous people around here are playing this prank to scare people. So how could my radio phone stop working? Maybe they have installed some kind of jamming device here. But a few days ago, when I was going forward and coming back to the same place over and over again, how was that happening? And how did those footprints disappear from the pictures I took with my phone? No one could do that. I had thought that I could not stay in this place for much longer. Just 2 or 3 days and then I would leave here, no matter what. But I did not know that my journey would end already. As I lay in bed at night, I started to have a very strange feeling again. The window in front of the bed was clearly visible. I couldn't stop. Just 2 or 3 days and then I'll leave here, no matter what happens. But I didn't know that my journey was already coming to an end. At night, when I was lying in bed, I started to feel a strange sensation again. The window in front of the bed was clearly visible. The room was plunged into darkness, which made the forest outside even more visible in the moonlight. And like last night, tonight too, I could see some shadows moving in the darkness. I already suspected that this must be someone's mischief. Last night too, I had seen similar shadows moving. And then in the morning, I found that bone ball. The same shadows tonight. Maybe these people are up to something again. Maybe they are preparing a new prank. I had to sneak up on them. I immediately put on my jacket without making a sound and started to go out, picking up my pistol. This time I had my flashlight in my hand, but I had not turned it on so that they would not know I was coming. I slowly got up and opened the door and started walking in that direction. Walking on the grass in the forest makes a slight sound, but I tried my best not to make any sound. I walked straight to the place where I had found the bones that morning. When I reached there, I hid behind a tree and looked to see who it was, but there was no one there. Not a human, not a shadow, not even an animal. Maybe they knew I was coming and ran away. No, If that was the case, I would have heard them running. It was completely silent there. There was no sound for a long distance. After hiding for 15 to 20 minutes, when I was sure that no one was there, I got up, turned on the flashlight, and started walking towards the pile of bones. But what was this? The bones that were placed inside the shell in the morning were now missing. That is, the shell was still there, but inside it were not bones, but something else. Severed human heads. Inside this shell were now severed human heads. And seeing this, the ground gave way under my feet. For a moment, I thought that these were not mannequins, but they were not mannequins. They were real heads, from which a little blood was also oozing, as if they had just been cut off. Oh my God. I looked closely with the flashlight and saw that these were the faces of the people who had disappeared from this sector some time ago. I had seen pictures of their faces in the file. All 4 heads were placed inwardly inside the sphere, as if they were all looking at each other. What I had previously thought was a joke or someone's mischief was a much more serious matter. Here, 4 people had been killed, and their heads were placed in front of me. Suddenly, a wave of fear ran through my heart. What kind of beast could do this? I didn't even have a radio phone at that time, but I had my mobile phone. It had no signal, but I could take pictures. I quickly took out my phone and started taking pictures of this horror. As soon as I turned on the flashlight to take a picture, I felt the eyes of a head placed in front of me suddenly turn towards me. But how could this be? That head's eyes were really looking at me now. I thought maybe I was being deceived by the darkness, so I turned to the side a little. But as soon as I was to the side, the eyes of the other head next to me turned to me. Oh shit, this was no joke. It was all right in front of my eyes. At that moment, all my courage was gone. I ran to my cabin and tried to contact the base on the radio phone. But this time, it wasn't static, but a strange language coming from the other end. I didn't want to stay here for a moment, but now I was afraid to even step outside the cabin. It felt like there was something sitting outside that would tear me apart and snap my neck as soon as I stepped out. All I could think about was getting out of here somehow this time and never coming back to this cursed area again. I was cursing myself in my heart as to why I had come here. Inside the cabin, I was cursing myself, huddled like a mouse, when suddenly something came to my mind that had not occurred to me before. That whatever was happening here was not natural, but supernatural. That is, some strange force or entity was doing all this. If it wanted to, it could have finished me off in a matter of seconds. But I was alive. Far from dying, I wasn't even hurt. That meant that whatever it was playing with me, but didn't want to kill me. I was told that there are many things that live in these forests, things that are beyond human comprehension. They usually do not harm the rangers. Maybe that is why it is very rare for a ranger to disappear from the forest or die, while thousands of people disappear and are killed in these forests every year. At that time, I did not pay much attention to what this ranger said, but now I felt that maybe he was right, because if he wanted to, one of those severed heads could have been mine, and there was no one to stop him from doing so. But it was still necessary to be careful. My fully loaded pistol was at the ready. As soon as anything came in, I would empty all the bullets on it, but no one came in. The whole night passed like this. When it was morning, I tried to call on the radio again, but the call was still not coming. Fuck the call. I had thought that I was not going to stay here at all now. I quickly packed all my belongings and went to my Jeep parked about 2 kilometers away and reached my base straight away. When I reached the base, my supervisor was not there at that time, but I called him from the base and told him the whole story. I told him clearly that I am not going to this area anymore. If you want, fire me from my job. She didn't argue with me. After about an hour, she also came to the base, and I told her everything. What had happened to me in the last few days, what I had seen and felt, but she wasn't very surprised to hear what I said, as if she was already expecting me to tell her all this. The Forest Administration posted me back to my previous sector. To be honest, I was ready to quit my job at that time. But I didn't need to. I handed over my entire report to them. I gave them whatever little evidence I had, but I don't think any further action was taken on it. It's been a year now. But even today, many times when I sleep in my cabin in the woods at night, It feels like shadows are watching me in the darkness outside my window. To tell you the truth, many times I see in those shadows the faces I saw in those severed heads. Many times I have dreams at night in which those missing people are calling out to me. I love my job very much, but now I never take the things that happen in these forests for granted.